Hello, everyone. I'm Glenn Crooks, a former women's coach at Rutgers University, currently a club coach at Players Development Academy here in New Jersey, radio commentator, New York City FC, and host of the Coaching Academy on SiriusXM FC. Well, a little over 2 years ago, Gregg Berhalter was named the head coach of the U.S. men's national team. He had previously coached Columbus Crew and Hammarby in Sweden's top tier, and he's got quite a calendar to manage in 2021. And my privilege here, brought to you by Volkswagen here at the United Soccer Coaches Convention, the virtual convention, my privilege to host the one-on-one with Gregg Berhalter. Gregg, how are you?
Hey, Glenn, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. Well, being a Jersey boy myself, I'm always intrigued with those who have a Jersey background. I tell all my non-Jersey colleagues that soccer in America, it always comes back to Jersey somehow.
Yeah, I think we were fortunate to just grow up in a hotbed of soccer. To think about some of the players that I was around growing up, I think it really helped form me as a player, and the coaches and the environment itself. I think there's something about the competitiveness in New Jersey that really brings out the best in people.
You grew up in Teaneck, and you went to St. Benedict's Prep. You're in a part of the state and a part of the country that's very diverse. Did that influence you a bit? You saw a lot of different cultures and a lot of different styles of play.
No, it did. And, starting with my club team, I started with the Bergen Kickers at 10 years old, and just the amount of diversity in that team. And then I went to Union County, and Claudio Reyna's dad, Miguel, was our coach. And again, the diversity, and, we're traveling to Brazil and Argentina and Uruguay at the age of 13, and, just an amazing upbringing in soccer. And we're really lucky, to grow up in that area.
And you mentioned Claudio. He was your teammate at St. Benedict's Prep. I remember your first press conference in December 2018 when you were named the national team coach. And Rick Jacobs was in the audience. And Rick was your coach at St. Benedict's, and massive success over the years. And tell me a little bit about Jacobs and his influence.
Rick was, first of all, it was an amazing experience to have being unveiled as the national team coach and have your high school coach there. It was a really special moment, just to see how far everything has come. But, Rick was a guy that was really strong in building culture, building team identity, and really, the detail of rituals and how you can, you bond around those things. And, he did a really good job of that. And then, the other part of it is, there's something about having a good team, but then having talent, but then getting that talent to perform continuously and consistently was something he did really well. We won all our games in all the seasons, but, we're winning them really in a consistent way. I think we gave up one goal my junior year or senior year and scored 105. So it was a very professional, focused group for sure.
And before we leave Jersey and your upbringing, were there other coaches who you felt were mentors or had an influence on you in a big way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you talk about Miguel Reyna, that was probably number one. But then when you look at Manny Schelscheit, who was huge in the whole area, I used to, go as a 16-year-old, go to guest tournaments with him, or 17 years old, and play U23 tournaments. And, he would be calling us every off season for pickup games. And anytime you had a free moment, Manny was programming it to play soccer. And that was, he always got good groups and good teams together. So, those are, two coaches that certainly had a big influence on me.
Well, when you graduated St. Benedict's, you went to University of North Carolina, but not too far thereafter, you started your professional career, and you elected to go to Europe. And you had experiences in Holland and Germany. So I wonder now, as you're coaching and you're coaching the national team and your previous experiences, how much did those playing experiences kind of mold how you wanted to get things done?
I think every experience shapes you. I also played in England where I really learned about the 4-4-2, a flat back four, and I think every experience that you have somehow shapes you. And I'd like to learn from every environment that I'm in. I tell all the players, no matter what type of coach you have, you can learn from him. Whether you love him or dislike him, there's something to learn. And I think that's the important thing is taking information in and trying to continue to grow.
I think that's something we've learned from the convention over the years. So many people
Yeah.
have presented things, and
Yeah.
you really, even if you do it exactly the same way in terms of how you set up the exercise, you might use a word a little differently or something like that.
Absolutely. I think it's about, um, you know, I do a lot of that, of continuing education also. And, one thing I've learned about it is that you should never be ashamed to take something from someone, take an idea from someone. And I think that's what you hear over and over again. Take ideas, take as many ideas as you can.
That is one thing I wanted to ask you, Greg, and we're with Gregg Berhalter, U.S. men's national team coach here at the United Soccer Coaches Virtual Convention, is continuing to educate yourself. I mean, you have a massive job. You're responsible for so many different aspects of what happens in this country, yet you still want to progress. So what kinds of things do you do?
Oh man, I'm on a ton of different calls with leaders in sport. I'm on a learning series with the Cleveland Indians, which has been amazing. They invite authors to come in and speak to the organization and have conversations about that, really creating learning environments. Read a lot of books, watch a lot of soccer. Those are all ways, have a lot of individual calls with coaches. So, in a lot of different ways, always just trying to improve, trying to pick up on things and learn more.
What are you taking away from the Cleveland Indians and that group? That's interesting.
They're amazing. It's an organization that is really focused on learning and continuing to learn. So they have an ex-Navy SEAL. His name is Jay Hennessy, fantastic guy, really a guru of learning. And so the whole environment they set up is to just get better and using every single day to try to improve, using every single resource to try to improve, and looking at different ways to do things.
Greg, when we review your playing career in Germany, you were on two different teams, and you ended up being the captain for both those teams. And this is back when it wasn't, it was more unusual for an American to go overseas and play. I find that, quite fascinating. Here's an American being not only accepted, but leading these two teams. What kinds of things happen within the program for you to get to that level?
I just think it's being authentic, being yourself. I think you set a certain standard of performance, of training, of professionalism, and I think at times that got not rewarded, but that got noticed by leadership, and they thought I would be a good person to lead the group. And it was a really, I think, really good experience, understanding, how to lead in a foreign country, understanding the importance of setting good examples, and competing. One thing I think is really important is, the effort, consistent effort. I always prided myself on having a consistent effort every single day and just working as hard as I can, trying to get the most out of it each and every day.
So you're at these clubs, you're captaining them. I'm assuming that along the way you're thinking about post-playing career, and I've heard other players talk about you, that you were a coach on the field. What would you do things like after training, try to diagnose what happened, maybe figure out how you would make it better? I mean, what kinds of things would you go through as a player, as your coaching career had not yet started, but maybe down the road?
Yeah, it was funny because when I first went to Holland, I was 20 years old, or just turned 21. And, I felt like I was at one big soccer camp, because you're away from your family, and basically all you're focused on is soccer, I think that's a positive, but it's also a negative to life sometimes abroad, is because when things aren't going well in soccer, that's all you really have. and especially at a young age. So for me, I just remember going back to my apartment, and I took out a notepad and I just wrote down the exercises of each training. I wrote down, how I would see the system functioning, the profiles, the attributes needed in each position, who's going to do what task on the field. And it was something that I just was really, I think, intrigued by that part of it. And then fortunately in Holland, everyone's an expert on tactics in Holland. So I got to have so many great conversations with my teammates and coaches. And, so that was really a good period for me. And then, when I was in Germany, I started taking my licenses. I did my UEFA A and B in Germany. And I think that was, really eye-opening just to learn the German coaching school and learn their coaching methods and start to understand that.
So the number of Americans now playing overseas, 10 American players in Champions League, match day 5, there were 7 that played in games. You had an experience, and you're talking about this culture where people are experts and are constantly talking about it, which, even today is still not the case here in the States. You hear about players that have played here, they go overseas. The first thing they say, it's like, it's such a football culture. So does that make it fairly vital that our top players have that experience?
Well, the way I look at that, Glenn, is I think, if you want to be a top soccer nation, you need players playing in the Champions League, right? Because that's the highest level. When you look at any team that's won the World Cup, they always have players playing in the Champions League. So that is part of it. But alongside of that, you also need a very strong domestic league. So I think there's 2 sides to that. And I think right now we're starting to check both boxes. And as the league has gotten better, the foreign clubs have been scouting the league and looking at younger players. If a younger player right now is able to play in Major League Soccer, it means he's a very good player, because the league has gotten so much better. And you see a guy like Brendan Aronson, who's gotten a lot of attention from breaking out last year, but having a really strong season this year at a young age. And he immediately got bought. Mark McKenzie's another example. You see there's interest in Brian Reynolds, who's played 16 games in Major League Soccer. It's because if you can play at a young age in Major League Soccer, you're doing a pretty good job.
The general public is pretty pumped up about these youngsters and what they might bring to the table. Do you share the same enthusiasm?
It's amazing, when I'm working with these guys and in camp and seeing how young they are and how much potential they have. It's a really positive thing. There's a long way to go. We can't get ahead of ourselves. Our job is to focus on every day, but the potential is exciting for sure.
Gregg, if I go back to your first press conference, I was there. You were in New York, and I was impressed. I was really thrilled with what you had to say about the style you wanted for your team. But again, the challenge of every national team coach, you're coming from a club environment where you have the players on a daily basis, and now the national team environment. And you referred to Columbus and how you wanted to build out of the back, play through the lines. But when you don't have a team that often, how difficult has that been? And have you made any sort of adjustments from what you had hoped to really, how to really go at it as far as accomplishing that?
I think so. I think I've definitely made adjustments. Not I think so. I know I've made adjustments. To me, it was about learning international soccer. And that was the most important thing, in understanding what phases of the game you need to emphasize, because we can focus on building out of the back or build up from goalkeeper all day, but if teams aren't going to press us and we're never going to get to utilize it, it's not a good use of time. So for me, that's what it was really understanding. And then what can we get more out of this player pool? How can I evolve my own game model to get more out of this player pool? And that's what I think you started to see in 2020 was, this aggressive 4-3-3 high pressing. It gave us a different look that we hadn't done before. And I think it's given us, some good turnovers. We're winning a lot more balls in the opponent's half. So to me, that's been interesting, that whole part of it. The one side is, Glenn, is that, I have this ideal of how we want to play soccer. And it is about breaking lines. It is about also using the ball and disorganizing the opponent, which is very important to us. But the other side of it is how do we just keep adding, and how do we become more dangerous and less predictable?
When you say disorganize the opponent, can you be more specific with what kind of things you
So
would try?
it's funny because, people have a hard time with that, right? But basically, it's about understanding how the opponent's going to try to build pressure on you and taking advantage of that, right? So a clear example would be, against El Salvador, say, for example, the last game, we felt that they were going to try to pressure in a 4-1-4-1, and they were going to release with their attacking midfielder, right? As we passed, they're trying to block the pass off with a forward, but we didn't think that they're going to be able to do that when our center backs had the ball. As we pass center back to center back, they're going to release with an attacking midfielder, right? What that means, though, is we immediately have an advantage centrally, right? Because we'll have 3 central midfielders. They'll only have 2 left. And then when we drop our striker down, we'll have 4 against 2. And then it's about recognizing who's the open center midfielder and finding them. So that's an example of dominoes now falling. As their attacking midfielder releases, right, we can find our central midfielder. They have to release another player to our central midfielder, and now we can play between the lines and then eventually behind the line. But that's an example of just understanding how to disorganize the opponent. And I think a good example, yes, sir, I don't know if you saw the game, was Man City-Chelsea or Chelsea-Man City.
Yes, saw it.
Great. It was a good example of disorganizing the opponent. If you saw, Cancelo on the right coming inside, Raheem Sterling going wide, they did a great job of just moving around and giving Chelsea, a very difficult time.
Yeah, it's safe to say Chelsea was chasing the game a bit.
Yeah.
Would you say? Yeah.
They were disorganized.
Now, you might have watched that game anyway, but Zach Steffen makes his EPL debut or starting debut for Man City. And he's someone you've spent a lot of time with at Columbus. And now he appears to be your number one for the men's national team. Tell us about Zach and his, he's been there for 2 years or so and getting his first start. And you always wonder if he's not getting games, how does that impact his development?
Yeah, well, the first year that he was there, he went on loan to Dusseldorf, right? So he got to play in the Bundesliga, and he did a great job. He's one of the top goalies when he was healthy in the Bundesliga. And the second year, the way I look at it is, if you invest a year of your time and you're working with Pep Guardiola and the quality of players that he's working with every single day and the shots he's facing in training, that's going to help him. Right. At a certain point, it's not going to help him anymore. But I don't think we're at that point yet. You see, he's playing games now. He's playing cup games. And I think that he's in a really good spot to be in that environment, to be at a level where you need to win every single game you're playing in. They play 60 games a season, and every single game they play in, they have to win it. And that's a different level. If we can get more players, and we have more players now, when we talk about Christian, you talk about Weston and Serginho, these guys can't lose games. They're at clubs where they're expected to win every single game they're in. And that's, when you get that, it's going to help the national team program.
Pulisic on the other side of the of the game yesterday. So is that difficult to watch sometimes when it's just when it's a struggle for one?
It's difficult, but in the same way, Christian acquitted himself well and showed that he has tremendous amount of quality. And to me, I think it was more a function of, the team not performing really well. Although Christian did his job.
Gregg Berhalter, our guest here at the United Soccer Coaches Virtual Convention. Also at that first press conference, Greg, I was intrigued because you made a point to really emphasize that you wanted to do more with the players outside of camp. Can you specify what you meant by that and how that's gone, and has it increased during the pandemic? Because you're talking about video libraries, webinars, different things like that.
I think it all comes back to, to the feeling or the need to create a strong group and a strong team culture. And then understanding that, because there's time, you don't have the normal time, that you can be more productive with your time, that you can find other moments to affect the player pool. So, it's as simple as one-on-one watching players games and sharing clips with them from their own games, right? So an example is we watch Reggie Cannon play for Boa Vista. I call Reggie up. I say, Reggie, you got a half hour to look over these clips, and we review his game. And, we look at some things that we felt he can do better. We get a better understanding of what it was expected from him in the game, right? What the game plan was, and did he execute that game plan? And then we give him some feedback. We've noticed that there's times where the clubs aren't giving the players enough feedback on their performance. And I know they're busy, and I know they have a lot of games, and the games come quickly, so you don't always have time for that. But we're there to support the player in that way as well. There's other things like having a riddle competition on a WhatsApp chat group with the team, to foster team spirit and team culture. There's tactical sessions that we do on Zoom with our own game model, where we're reviewing our principles of play with the guys. So we're trying to get creative. We're cognizant of what the players have going on in their club environment, so we don't want to be overbearing, but we're trying to take advantage of small moments of time to help.
Yeah, when you talked about discussing these things or getting on a Zoom with a player during their club season, so the clubs welcome that. There aren't any objections.
No, we would never tell them something like contradictory to what their club is telling them. That's not what we focus on. It's really just trying to understand what was asked of him in the game and review the game on that. There is a fine line, and we're aware of that fine line, and we understand what the player's doing with this club is really important, and we're there to support that effort.
Could you share with us a little bit what you suggested to Reggie Cannon? Where do you see his game going? I think people have really been thrilled with how he's looked on the outside at the back. What's your assessment?
I think for, in that particular game, there were a couple things we felt he could be closing down his opponent quicker. There were times where he gave his opponent too much time to receive the ball. So that was something. And then at moments that the ball's getting switched, can he be a more aggressive, trying to get behind their back line, attacking wise? And so just pointing those out. And, this was, relatively early on in his time there. So it was something where he had to get used to, to playing at that level and used to his teammates.
Another guy, Serginho Dest, who you brought up, his debut, if I have this right, was against Mexico at MetLife Stadium here in Jersey. Yep. And, people are, there's a buzz about this guy, but one thing I recall is he got megged for the first Mexican goal. I mean, it was a struggle for him at first.
Yeah, no, he did. And he was, and he was playing left back and he got beat on the first goal, but overall, I think he performed well. What I saw was at a young age, he's just calm. He's calm on the ball. To be a good team, you need players that can receive the ball under pressure, and he's a guy that can do that. And that's something about, when we look at those games are important to help the team grow. They're not, that's what we use them for. It's not something where we say, okay, a friendly game against Mexico is going to make or break this program. It's about learning from these games. And what you want to do is position yourself, develop yourself, that when you're in must-win games, you can win those games, right? Talk about World Cup qualifying, the World Cup. That's what you do all this for, right? It's to perform at events like that.
I love that you put it that way, because I felt the same way after that Mexico game, but that was not necessarily the feeling amongst the supporters and other members of the media. There was a lot of stress there in the general public, questions about whether the players are good enough to play the way you want to play, because you did a lot of building out of the back in that game. I think the first couple of goals were mistakes out of the back, but that was intentional, correct? You knew Mexico was going to press you high.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about this, right? So the first goal, we gave up chances playing out of the back for sure. The second goal late in the game, after we made 5 changes, was a direct result of playing out of the back. The third goal was a counterattack. The first goal was a cross after you referenced Serginho got beat, right? But we definitely made mistakes. But for us, what it was an opportunity to practice time and time again playing out of the back, where we don't get that opportunity all the time. Teams don't high press us, and we knew Mexico is all they're going to do is high press us. So what we got was a lot of information from that game, and some of it was good, or some of it was positive, and some of it was negative in terms of what we can handle, what we're good at, what we need to improve, when we need to bypass pressure. Right? If they're releasing, so in this game, they were playing, 4-2-3-1, 4-1, 4-1 at times. They're very man-orientated in central midfield. They're releasing with their wingers at times, who are center backs, and they were releasing with their fullbacks to our fullbacks. But it also meant that we were left with a 2v3, or they had 2 defenders, or we had 3 attackers high up the field. And that's valuable information for us to gain, because if we know they're going to do that, I think it gives us a clear understanding of where the ball needs to go and how we need to get it there.
Another player I wanted to ask you about, Tyler Adams. It was funny. I remember the stir you created when you started him at right back. And I, as far as I know, that's the only time he's played right back for you. Who was the right back for Leipzig at the start of the game a couple of days ago?
Yeah, exactly. No, listen, it's the thing about it is it's fun. I think it's fun for us to look at the possibilities, right? Look at the flexibility of a team. Look at the flexibility that one player can give you. So he can play right back defensively, but in the game, every time attacking, he came inside and played centrally. And that's, I think that's something that, sometimes we miss the fantasy. We miss the ideas of trying things and being creative. And that was an example of us trying to do that. But, it's all about taking advantage of the qualities you have on the field and the quality of your players.
Greg, if I could ask you about dual nationals, that's always a hot topic. And I thought the way you have talked about your approach to that is very healthy. There's been discussion in the past that we've lost dual nationals because we don't communicate with them frequently enough, that sort of thing. You seem to want to bring them in and just sell your environment, not hit them over the head with a bat and say, hey, you should be with us because we're better. You tried to show them that. Could you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, the way I look at this, Glenn, is it's very complicated. It's not straightforward. So an example I'll give you is, say, a Mexican-American player that he grew up in America, but his parents are Mexican. They have a real close attachment to Mexico. And as a child, you look up to your parents, and if they're pushing you hard in one direction, even though you grew up in America, there could be a conflict there. And all we want to do is acknowledge that this player could be torn, right? It's completely normal that this player doesn't know exactly what they want at this moment in time, particularly with young players. So what we want to do is bring them into our environment and say, listen, this is what we're about. And we, and this is how we can support you. And by the way, we'll support you with whatever decision you make. We're behind you because we know it's a difficult one. And, we tried to do that with all our players. Serginho is an example of a guy that, he had Holland going after him also. And our youth national team programs have done a good job of integrating him at a young age. And when it came to us, I met with him, Ernie met with him, and we talked to him about what we can offer him and how we see him performing in our program. And he chose us, and that was great. But, there's going to be some situations that they don't choose us, and that's also fine. This is all just part of it. All we can do is represent ourselves and show the players, what the environment looks like for them.
Yeah, there's some players here. Yunus Musa, yeah. Andres Pereira, Daryl Dike, Ayo Akinola, David Ochoa, Farfan, yep. Araujo, Alvarez. It's quite a group. I know you probably hope that they all lean your way. But what about your environment do you think gives you an advantage if you do?
Well, I know it's about learning. It's about learning together. It's about the collective. It's not about pointing fingers. It's about supporting each other. It's about being very clear with expectations, being very detailed with the culture of who we are. It's taking great pride in who we are, taking great pride in playing for the U.S. national team, representing our country. And it's an environment that we want to challenge ourselves. We want to push ourselves. We want to be great.
Gregg, this comes up quite a bit, and I think your perspective really is essential since you played there. The number of Americans that are now in Germany, the Bundesliga, playing, developing. What is it about? Is it Germany and Americans as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think the mentality matches up pretty well. The Germans are very I think they're very programmed people. They're very straightforward people. They're very competitive. They're very driven, and I think that matches up pretty well with who we are, and what type of athletes we produce. We're very disciplined. Generally, you know what you get when you bring an American in. You know what you get. You know he's going to have a good attitude. You know he's going to work hard. You know he's going to be focused, and that's something that the Germans really appreciate. The second thing is that, as of late, the Bundesliga is about playing young players. When you look at the amount of young players that are on loan from England and young Americans that are playing in the Bundesliga now, it's really about giving young players a chance, which I think is good. And it's a high level. So all those things, you have working together to be pretty successful.
Gregg, I want to ask you about coaches. So we've talked about players going overseas, having that experience, and how that's benefited their development. But very few American coaches seem to get that chance to go overseas. You've got Jesse Marsch, you've got Pellegrino, but it's so few. Do you think it's important for the coaches stateside to maybe get that experience as far as their own development is concerned?
Yeah, I think that's something that's coming. I think just as you see now the amount of players that we have playing at the top level, I think you're going to see the coaches. Jesse's done a great job of performing really well with Red Bull Salzburg. Pellegrini's doing a great job at Stuttgart. He's a guy that was brought up in the German system, but is American and playing really performing really well as a coach. And I think that's going to come. Bob Bradley did a great job when he was overseas in France and Norway. So I think that's going to come more and more. Just as we have foreign coaches in Major League Soccer, I'm sure there's going to be Americans going to foreign countries.
Is there a lot for them to pick up if they go over, though? Is it just like the American player? It's the culture of the country. Would that make it a valuable experience?
I think that's important. When I was in Sweden, it was really understanding the Swedish culture and understanding how to coach Swedes. And I had to do a lot of work on the front end, just learning about Swedish culture, what it is, what's it like, how to best communicate with Swedes. So there is something, there is that learning curve that you definitely need to have.
All right, Gregg, just a couple more things. I look at the calendar that you have to manage. Olympic qualifying, hopefully the Olympics, CONCACAF Nations League, Gold Cup, World Cup qualifying, which is unique this year. It's going to be 8 games in 3 months. So what do you think?
It's a lot. It is a lot. And, I think, one thing I struggled with a little bit last year in 2020 is just having, all these different groups. If you think about January camp was one group of players, and we went to Europe, we had another group of players because we couldn't all come together. And then December camp, we had another group of players. At times it gets frustrating because you just want to get the group together. You want to get your top players together and just go. But, I think that's the beauty of coaching the U.S. team. Is that you get to see a lot of players, you get to work with a lot of players, you get to influence a lot of players, and that's been really fun. And now when we come up to a year like 2021, now you get to put all that into practice because we're going to have to call on, 30 to 40 players next year. It's going to have to be because of the jam calendar. It's unreasonable to say that we're going to take a guy, say a top performer in MLS, Jordan Morris, for example, and he's going to miss all of June and July being with the national team. It's just not going to happen. Even though we're allowed to, it's going to be really difficult to do something like that to the clubs. So we're going to have to work. We're going to have to get creative, and the rosters are going to be jumbled up, I think, in Nations League and Gold Cup. And then World Cup qualifying is where it's going to be important to have the whole group together, and that's going to be a must. And those games are going to be fun.
So your experience in MLS with Columbus Crew, I would imagine you're going to be a little bit more sensitive to the concerns of the clubs in MLS. Being the men's national team coach of the U.S., number one for sure, but the fact that you've had that experience, that balance is pretty interesting, I think.
It is, and I know how hard it is. I know how much work the coaches put into it, and as much as I can support them, as much as we can support them, we will. But it's the same thing with European guys. It's tough to ask a European guy who's been in season, from September to June, and then to come in and play June and July and not have any break and go back to his club. So I understand that point of view also, having played in Europe. So it's a give and take on both sides. And, we'll do our best to get it right, knowing that when World Cup qualifying comes around, there's going to be very little concessions at that stage.
Well, if we're fortunate enough to qualify, I don't know if you even want to approach this, but Qatar 2022, is there a level, is there a result level that would be necessary for you to feel like it's successful? Is success getting to the World Cup? Is success getting there and performing at a high level? Do you have a picture of that yet?
Well, I think the first step, the first hurdle we have, and which will be a success, is qualifying, right? I mean, we have a young group, we have a talented group, but we didn't qualify last time, so we're going to have to get that done first. And the second thing is then seeing what the group looks like, and then setting goals. I think, when we get our team playing at a high level, I think we're capable of beating, any team. And then it's just about, who do we match up with? Can we get out of our group, and then take it game by game? One thing I've learned about playing in the World Cup is, you got to get out of the group, and then you just take it game by game. You never know who you're going to play. You focus on that game, and then you move on to the next one. You focus on that game, and you just do that. And if you can do that enough, you'll be in a good position.
All right. Finally, Gregg, I thought it was a great picture. MLS's back tournament in Orlando. No spectators, but our men's national team coach was there scouting, and there was that picture of you on the sideline with your mask on, sitting in your chair. And it was, I'm sure, a bit surreal as you looked out onto the field, and a homegrown player for Columbus, Gregg Berhalter, made his professional debut. So There had to be some emotion there. We couldn't read it on your face, but we really couldn't see your face with the mask on.
Yeah, no, of course, it was an emotional moment for us, as a family, and just me being able to be there live and watch him play, watch him perform his first game. And then, they go on to have a great season and win the MLS Cup. It was an amazing rookie season for Sebastian. And I know how much work he's put into it. I was, at Columbus, and I know, he entered the academy at 13 years old, and then you see 6 years later, he's on the field for the first team. It's a great feeling, and I think it's everything that MLS academies have been doing. And the reason why we are where we are right now with youth development is because of the effort and the time and the resources that MLS academies and all academies across America have put into it.
Well, I know there's a lot of optimism, Gregg, and your guidance is really something to behold at this point. And I wish you all the best with what will be, another interesting year. But hopefully we get past some of the obstacles. And I wish you all the success in the world, and good luck in qualifying. Good luck to the U23s, and we go from there.
Thanks, Glenn. It was great talking to you.